Happy New Year. Happy 2025. An interesting thing happened today, which I wasn't expecting. Matt Might texted me this morning and pointed out that miniKanren was on the front page of Hacker News, and at 11:24 it ended up being the number one article on front page of Hacker News. miniKanren related things have been on the front page of Hacker News and a number of times, but this was just kind of unexpected. And I don't know if we've ever hit number one, especially since, there wasn't some new announcement or anything like that or new talk. It was, just what is miniKanren, the intro to miniKanren.org, and ended up with, currently has like 101 comments or something. So that was nice. It was just unexpected, and people reached out to me about it, and I don't know, just give them. That's the sort of thing that gives me a little boost, and probably other people in the miniKanren community is like, oh, okay. Now, a lot of the comments were, what is this thing? Why is your website so bad? I'm not smart enough to learn this. I tried and failed. But the fact that people were interested at all, that it got to, this point, a lot of people liked Matt Might's talk on precision medicine and miniKanren. That came up a number of times, and that is a great talk. That's worth watching if you haven't seen it. That was a Jane Street version of the talk that people were referring to, but he's given versions of that talk multiple times. So that was fun. One thing people really didn't like is that the website miniKanren.org doesn't use HTTPS. It still uses HTTP, and that's entirely my fault because I didn't know how to do it when I set this up on my own machine years ago, and I just never fixed it. Someone's like, to think that in 2024 websites don't use HTTPS. Well, fair comment. I'll just say that I didn't set it up in 2024, and I just, sort of was lazy about it, and people have complained, and I just didn't do anything about it. But several people pointed out the security implications of not having HTTPS, where a malicious actor could, insert malicious content into a page to an unsuspecting victim. So it was like on public Wi-Fi or something. So we got to fix that. And we're taking steps now to get that fixed. We're going to do a whole new web page. That's something Jason Heeman had been talking to me about for a while. Anyway, I think Jason's right. It's just time to redo it. That was kind of an okay website, I guess, years ago. It was better than nothing. But the website is quite old. A lot of the links are out of date in terms of, blog posts from, 2007 or something that probably aren't even live anymore. So we can do better. So I think we just need to rethink it. Another suggestion was, you've got miniKanren variants in lots of languages. Why don't you have, examples very early on the page, and maybe have some tabs where you can see in a language of your choice, like you want to see Python. I think at least implicitly it was pretty clear some people were confused. Well, what is this language for, and what do you use it for? Okay, so if people don't know logic programming, maybe they've heard of it, but they don't, they're not experienced with it, or maybe they've done a little bit of Prolog and they want to know, well, what's this miniKanren thing? I think it's not very clearly explained unless you already have some vocabulary. If you know Prolog well, you can read that thing I wrote about what's the difference between Prolog and miniKanren, and that makes sense. But if you don't know Prolog and you don't know miniKanren, then that probably isn't very helpful. So that's worth thinking about. I think it's tricky because, say, how you would use core.logic for a pragmatic project would be very different than, playing around with, say, miniKanren stuff that I'm doing, kind of very sort of extreme opposite end in terms of research. So, the fact is that people have used miniKanren variants for different things. So what it's used for and what that website, maybe the website needs to, have a page that talks about pragmatic uses and has a page that talks about research uses and, page that talks about synthesis or whatever it is. Variants, extensions like alphaKanren. Not sure, but, worth thinking about how to do it from scratch. Another comment I heard from someone was that they weren't smart enough. They tried reading a paper and they didn't get it. And of course, we want miniKanren, those ideas of miniKanren relational programming to be accessible. That's why, Dan writes little books. That's why I try to take a lot of care with papers, for example, or talks in terms of explaining things without using a lot of jargon. But it's just hard because miniKanren's so different than, say, someone coming from a Java background or a Python background. Parts of it are different enough that, there's people are going to have to learn some new concepts, and those are tricky to present, and it's often what I've seen in practice is that people have to see it a few times before they get it. And that was true of me, by the way. I had to see logic programming a few times before it started to really click. But that's something we can do better with, especially on the website, I think. And then a couple times it came up that we're presenting in Lisp, and that might be a source of some problems. That people know Lisp, or so Python, or they know, maybe Java, but a lot of people know Python now, and having examples in Python could be helpful. Now, one reason I've thinking about this is that, for work purposes, I'm learning Python 3 and working with a bunch of technologies using Python. And I haven't really used Python since Python 1. And, it's no secret that I wasn't a big fan of Python. So, the fact that it's not functional, it has some nice features, but it is very different than sort of the direction I've been going over the last 20 years towards, extreme declarativeness. Now, some of the tooling around Python adopts those ideas. So it's not like no one in the Python community has figured out that some of these ideas are useful. And some of the tooling actually absolutely adopts notions of declarativeness and immutability and functional transformations and stuff like that. But the Python language itself, I think, doesn't have the greatest support for it. So anyway, that got me thinking, well, what would make sense Python-wise? And of course, there's the SICP version that's now in JavaScript. And I have somewhat mixed feelings about that. Well, realistically, that might be a good thing to get more people involved in some of those ideas, but I also think some of those ideas just aren't easily or readily expressed or naturally expressed in Python. in JavaScript. And I kind of feel about the same way about that, like with miniKanren. I get the sense that like the relational interpreters would not work out the same way in Python. Now, I don't know. Maybe that's not true. Maybe they would work out just fine. Makes me curious now. Like if you did, a really nice Python implementation of miniKanren, and you tried to do, I guess, the equivalent of a Python interpreter in Python, but do it relationally, what would that look like? Or, you could do, I guess, a scheme interpreter in Python. Now, of course, if you do a scheme interpreter in Python, you still have the same issue of someone's looking at scheme code or Lisp code. And if they really find that's weird, then I don't know that makes sense. So you would want them to do a Python interpreter in Python. What would that look like relationally? I don't know. But, Python tends to have imperative features. I think you'd have to either really stick to things like comprehensions and maybe Lambda. I don't know. You could try writing the Python in a functional way, but then, does that really feel like regular Python usage? Maybe you could do comprehensions. I'm not sure. I'm curious. So, anyone who has a lot of experience with Python, and especially Python interpreters, what does a Python in Python look like? And what would a relational version of that look like? I don't know. Maybe it would work out okay, and maybe that's absolutely something we should do. Or maybe it just turns out that would be such an awkward expression of the ideas we're trying to explore with relational interpreters that, just kind of lose it. It's, the syntax is more comfortable for people, but the ideas are so much messier that it just doesn't make sense. I don't know. So I don't have a good sense of that, but I'd be curious to explore it. And I'm learning all this stuff. I'm learning, basically modern data science and data engineering. A lot of it's Python. You have Docker and Kubernetes and all the hosting stuff, and AWS, those types of things, Neo4j, and Python is like deep learning and LLMs and embeddings. But there's also like the learning frameworks and pipeline systems and getting code to run on clusters, coordination over clusters. And every time I look, it seems like, oh yeah, here's another 10 tools, just give you one example, Python package management and environment management. I think at this point I've come across at least 6 or 7 tools, that are actively used for managing Python environments, and also other people just don't use it at all. And then, there's pip, and then pipx and UV for the package management. And there's conda, and, I've come across other things, and there's pyenv, right? And, how exactly does pyenv play with or overlap with conda? I don't know. UV has a pip mode, how does pipx work with pip? Is it bad if you install some things with pip and then some things with UV without the pip UV mode? All that stuff. I'm sure if you use Python all the time and that's all you use, and you've done this 1,000 times, it's just probably just not that big a deal. But as someone who's coming into this not used to that infrastructure, I just find it frustrating because, I end up with a mess, and, I don't even know how many times I've tried to uninstall every single version of Python completely, and uninstalled pip and uninstalled UV and then reinstalled, and, tried to make sure that, my environment variable settings were all pristine. And, I've even thought, do I need to wipe my operating system and start over again? Anyway, that's frustrating. So I understand when someone comes to miniKanren.org page and they're trying to understand miniKanren, what it is, or looking for examples, and they're reading a paper and they're like, what in the world? Or the online tutorial, they thought that was at too high a level in terms of assumption of knowledge of things like unification. It is a very short tutorial. It's definitely not a full introduction to the ideas of logic programming. So I definitely understand the frustration of, and confusion, because I'm running into it all the time right now. Now, I actually think that's good, especially since I'm writing a book right now. I never want to forget that sense of confusion and frustration. I think that, anytime I teach a course, for example, I make sure that I'm learning something new that I'm not good at, to keep in mind. Like, I can't remember what it's like to learn programming for the first time because I was very, very young, or even Scheme for the first time. I kind of remember that. I can definitely remember trying to learn logic programming, how frustrating that was. But, having, in your daily life, that frustration of trying to learn something, I think is important to me. Sort of keep that within reach emotionally. So, keep that empathy for the person who's reading or taking the course or whatever. And the other thing is, I remember I had a student once at Indiana who was taking a course that involved Scheme, and she was really having trouble with it. And it came out, just through conversations over the semester, I found out that she was actually this incredible dancer, and she was in like major productions, dance productions, that type of thing, like someone who, professional level, or on her way to be a professional level dancer. And I've never been able to dance at all. So I liked hearing that, because, like, okay, here's someone who's really struggling, but she's really good at something that I've, struggled with completely. And so, like, okay, we're in different contexts, like, she's the super expert, and I'm really fumbling around. So it's not like I'm smart, or I'm good, or I'm experienced, or whatever, or she's smart or she's good. It's like, very contextual, right? We have, we each had deep expertise and interests and love of the things that we were into, but they were different things. So, that's also a good reminder. So anyway, in any case, I've been thinking about these things, and, I am learning about all these technologies and frameworks and everything. I mean, part of it is just disgusting. The complexity of it, how many tools there are. I want to run back to Scheme land and, cling to R5 or S. Even R6 is a bit too complicated for me. But on the other hand, it also feels like learning biology. Like, you can't just say, okay, I'm going to learn everything about this one gene, and then, or this one protein, and then I'll study everything else in biology. That doesn't even make sense, because everything's interacting. Like, you can't study that protein without, understanding the other proteins and how those are interacting with this protein, or how the protein's changing shape when it interacts with small molecules or stuff like that. You can't study one of those components in isolation. You have to understand how it all works together. And that includes at the level of organs and, entire ecosystems and evolutionary principles and all that. It all fits together, and you can't really understand one part of it without having at least some understanding of everything. So that's kind of what it's like right now. I'm just trying to get up to speed on different pieces, parts, and learning, okay, there's this one thing that looks interesting. I guess I should learn about that a little bit. And that's confusing, So miniKanren, in some sense, is really simple. The ideas there. And a lot of the ideas in some of these systems I'm looking at actually are pretty simple as well. It's just that, they've got a zillion features, and, they're it's like, how does this version of this tool differ from the slightly different version, of another tool? And it's like, well, they kind of overlap, but, maybe you would use this version in this case, and you would use this language in this case. And I don't know. It's just like it's very complicated. It's not cut and dry. It's In any case, I'm learning a lot, so that's good, and trying to enjoy it. Certainly keeping me busy and stimulated. So, look for a new miniKanren website, miniKanren.org website. We'll still keep the domain name, miniKanren.org. But if you have ideas or suggestions for how the website should work, let me know. All right. Thank you. Have a good one. Bye-bye.